Welcome to Full Faith, Empty Arms, a podcast for those walking the difficult road of infertility, especially within the context of faith. I'm Shannon Adams, here with my dear friend Pam Denison, and our hope is to create a place where honest conversations can happen, where hard things can be spoken out loud, and where no one has to feel quite so alone. If you pressed play today, we know it might have taken a little bit of courage. Infertility can be deeply personal, isolating, and painful, especially within the culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where family is such a central part of life and identity. The idea behind Full Faith, Empty Arms is that both can exist at the same time. It's possible to love God, to have meaningful faith and hope, and still struggle, grieve, and have very real pain. There are many forms of infertility, and while this may not have been a path you chose, we're really glad you found us. We hope these conversations feel a little bit like sitting down with friends who understand. Today you'll hear a bit of Pam's story. Pam does not have children and has been walking this path for many years. She's faced health challenges and other difficult realities along the way. She and her husband also spent several years fostering children, something we'll probably devote an entire future episode to. Pam has one of the biggest hearts of anyone I know. She's one of my dearest friends, and I'm incredibly grateful to have her with me in these conversations. So with that, Pam, will you just give our listeners kind of an overview of your story?
Sure. So I was married to my wonderful husband, Steven, back in 2010. um, and gosh, my my infertility problems started even before getting married. I have had PCOS, which has recently been renamed to PMOS. Don't ask me what that stands for right now because I forgot.
Yeah, I saw that
Um,
too.
yeah, I know it's a better definition of what it is that we go through. However, I did actually have the ovary cyst that not everybody gets. So the week before our wedding, I started bleeding. I thought, oh, great, I'm starting my period. I bled that whole week and it sort of paused for the day of my wedding, which was great because, white dress and blood don't really mix. But I made it through the day, but then the next day I started bleeding again. And I kept bleeding for I think it was another 3 or 4 weeks and went to the doctor and they said you have a tumor growing in your uterus. I think they said I think they saw 2 at the time. And they said you need to have surgery and I was like, "Great. I just got married, working, so much fun." So February 19th comes and I have surgery, and it was supposed to be a quick laparoscopic surgery where they, go through the belly button and pull everything out that way. It was not that quick and easy. Unfortunately, they had to cut me open like a C-section to get the tumor out because it was just one, but it was bigger than they initially thought, and it was also growing on the lining of my uterus, which makes this whole surgery a lot more complicated. But they were able to get everything, and man, it was a painful recovery because it's, right there with all your muscles that you use for moving and everything. I gained quite a bit of weight after that surgery, and I didn't go back to the doctor for a while. It was a gynecologist that I had gone to, and because my friend that has PCOS um, was able to get pregnant using this gynecologist, and so I thought, great, maybe he'll, figure out something with PCOS, and I'll be able to have kids. But I didn't go back because of my needle phobia. So I did not go back to the doctor until 2016. And in those years, I never got pregnant. My period was never regular. I would sometimes have it for, a week and then several months. Sometimes a year or two would go by without having a period at all. And then when I went back in 2016, I only went back because I had been bleeding for 4 months already. Not for a period like a week long. No, I had been bleeding for 4 months. And it was just getting heavier and heavier. The funny thing is, I had just started fostering probably a month or two before this bleeding started. So I don't know if like my hormones were different, like getting all motherly hormones, I don't know, but it caused this bleeding and unfortunately I still had my needle phobia and didn't want the doctor to do too much. And she goes, "Oh, well, you have PCOS because you're fat, basically." Which for people that don't know PCOS, there's a lot of skinny people that have PCOS. So it's not something I had because I was fat. It's actually the opposite. PCOS makes it really hard for you to lose weight. But this doctor just wanted to put me on birth control pills. She said, "That'll fix everything. We'll get you pregnant in no time." I try to believe the doctors know what they're talking about, but when they don't always listen to you, it's hard to trust them. So at the time, she did say that the lining in my uterus was thick, which did seem weird since I had been bleeding for 4 months.
Yeah.
And so you would think after 4 months of heavy bleeding that it wouldn't have still been thick, but it was. And she said, just take the birth control pills, that'll help it all flush out and go back to normal. Um,
So the birth
yeah,
control was just meant to be a short thing to kind of
yeah,
regulate the cycle, and then you were gonna start some other treatments or interventions.
yeah. But it just, in my head, I'm thinking, this doesn't sound right. Shouldn't we get to the cause of all this heavy bleeding or whatever? And, they did ultrasounds, vaginal ultrasounds to get in there and see everything. And she didn't see any tumors or anything, which was my biggest fear because having already had one, I thought, okay, that's probably what's going on again. She didn't see any to worry about, just that the lining was thick. But I knew there was something else going on. But then Steven and I ended up moving back to the Fort Worth area a couple months later. So I didn't really go back to that doctor. And I don't remember, I think I stayed on the birth control for a while. But when I moved, I didn't look for another doctor because it was, it's just stressful and they all want to poke you with needles. And unfortunately, I had really bad anxiety to where if I ever did have to have blood drawn, like, when I worked at a hospital, I had to have these 4 ex-military guys hold me down just so that the phlebotomist could draw some blood. Um, if I wasn't being held down, my body would physically fight people, and I'm like, "Just sit there calm, like, what's the problem?" And I couldn't. There was another time where I ended up throwing up because it was I just the anxiety was so bad. So because of that, I didn't look for another doctor. And eventually I got off the birth control and I just didn't have a period again for several months to a year.
It's so funny because I hear that and I think, "That sounds amazing." To
Yeah.
not have a cycle for, like, a year, oh my gosh, I
Yeah, so
but
many people are like, "Oh, you're so lucky to not have a period," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm lucky, but I know that there's something wrong,
yeah,
and
something's wrong, it's not a
also
good thing.
not ever getting pregnant."
No,
So, that's yeah.
it's a problem, yeah.
Yeah, definitely a problem. Steven and I started fostering again after we moved to Fort Worth, and funny enough, my body started having a period again.
Which is what had happened last time you were fostering?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had gone a while without a period, and then I foster, and I don't know if it's like the hormones. The body is amazing, honestly. So I started fostering these little boys and ended up with their baby brother in January. And after that, like, is when I started having a period again. And, like, a lot of moms after having a baby go through postpartum depression. There was a while when I was like, I did not birth this baby, but my body is going crazy. So it was really weird. I'm trying to remember if I went back on birth control or not. I don't think I did, but my periods were mostly normal for a while again until 2020. Yeah, 2020, man, I know it was a hard year for a lot of people because of the pandemic, but 2020 was the absolute worst year of my life. We had had this one foster daughter for a year. We got her January of 2019, and in March of 2020, she went back to her mom, and that was so hard on us because we love her so much, and we thought, like, after a year, is she really gonna go back to her mom? Is everything gonna be okay? My husband doesn't cry. I've seen him cry 3 times in our marriage, and 2 of those are when dogs died, and one of them was when our foster daughter, Charlotte, went back to her mom. We still had 2 other foster kids at home. Their parents had just lost their parental rights, and it was March 2020, so school just, like, everything just kinda stopped in the world. The kids weren't going back to school. Steven, he wasn't sure what was happening with his job, so he was home for a couple of weeks, um, until we hoped they would let him go back. And then this one Sunday evening, we get a message from the kid's foster dad saying that he is never giving up on his kids. They don't love us, they love him, they're what he needs. It was a whole mess. He wasn't even supposed to be able to have our contact information, and somehow he found my husband on Facebook. So that was really scary because these kids also, their parents had some violent past. So at this point, some things happened. It was not the greatest situation over here, but we decided we could not foster anymore. My husband was tired of taking care of other people's kids, as he put it, because it just felt like glorified daycare.
Were you fostering with the hope to adopt
Oh yeah.
in okay.
Yeah. These kids, the last 2 kids that we had, um, we had met them in Christmas 2018. We did respite for them for a week. They spent Christmas with us while their foster family, went on vacation. You have to get a lot of permission to be able to take kids out of state when you're fostering, so it's just easier to find someone that could do respite, and we didn't have any other foster kids at the time, so we said, "Sure, we'll watch them."
Oh, so they were
Um,
with another foster family that was
yeah,
okay, traveling, okay, yeah.
yeah, but then like a couple months later, I guess that foster family decided they didn't want these kids anymore. So we were contacted to see if we would take them. We had Charlotte at the time, but we wanted more. And so we took them. We got them, I think it was like June or July 2019. So they had been with us for a long time. And the plan was the parents were losing their rights. These kids were on the path to be adopted. But after that contact from the father, it probably would have been too dangerous for the kids to stay with us. I'm hoping that their birth parents don't know where they are now, um, because it was that dangerous. Yeah, so that was March. I had started my period again, bleeding for a while, but I didn't tell anybody because my parents were going on vacation out of the country and I didn't want them to worry. And so I didn't tell anybody and I just dealt with it for a while. Steven went back to work, thankfully. Um, the kids were moved. So it was just me at home dealing with this bleeding. I started looking for a job because I was like, okay, the reason I wasn't working was because we were fostering, so I was going to go back to work. I found a job that I could do from home, but I just was really losing a lot of energy. I was tired and in pain, and the bleeding was just getting worse. And so I finally said, you know what? I probably need to go to the doctor. And I actually called my mom and I said, Mom, I think I need to go to the hospital. Because I was just bleeding, but it was like thick, thick, heavy bleeding. So I honestly like thought I was bleeding to death
Ugh.
because I I was getting lightheaded and dizzy and like I couldn't even shower without feeling like I was gonna faint. Um, so I called mom and I said, I think I need to go to the hospital. And for them to hear that, that's
They knew that
huge.
was a big deal.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
because for one, when you're going to the hospital, they're gonna draw blood. They're gonna have to draw blood because they have
Yeah.
to see what's
They got to
going
figure out
on.
what's going on. Yeah.
And so for me to know that, yeah, it's gonna have to happen.
Hmm.
I need to back up a little bit to December
Okay.
2019 because December 2019, I had gotten an infection in my foot and had to go to the ER. So that's the time when they had to give me something to get blood drawn, and that was a horrible situation. I was in the hospital for almost a week. It was Friday night when I went in, and I left on a Thursday. And at that point, I had been diagnosed with diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Yeah, so I had had that experience with needles and everything. And so for me to say I need to go back to the hospital was like even bigger at that time because I knew what was coming. And of course, they draw blood, they did ultrasounds, and they found a tumor in my uterus. And I'm thinking, okay, cool. Like, let's just do surgery to get this thing out now so we can move on, right?
That's what they did last time,
Right.
more or less.
Well, since it was the hospital, they're like, you have to go see an OB-GYN, figure out what's going on. So I found a new OB-GYN and he was so nice. And I feel like he actually listened to me. But he did say, we're going to put you on birth control to regulate the bleeding again. And once that's normalized, we'll see what we do from there. So he puts me on birth control. A couple months later, he's like, we need to do a biopsy. of your uterus to see what's going on, because the bleeding did stop mostly, but it just still wasn't right. So this was November of 2020, and he's like, we just need to rule out cancer so that we can move on to other treatments. Um, he's like, I'm pretty sure it's not cancer. You're too young. I was 35. And he's like, this is just one of those things you have to do so that you can move on to other options. Um, I was freaked out about a biopsy because needle, again, why are they doing this to me? I did some hypnotherapy with my therapist so that I wouldn't feel it. It was amazing. I didn't feel anything in the biopsy. So I was like, great, this is a huge blessing. Things are looking good. The next week was Thanksgiving. My family, we went on a little vacation to Broken Bow. Really nice cabin with the family. But I was like, okay, they're supposed to call me by this day, or they told me to call. It was like the day after Thanksgiving. I hadn't heard anything. So I call the doctor and he's like, I am so sorry to tell you this, but you have endometrial cancer. So freaking out a little bit, like, cancer. I can't have cancer. No way, right? Like, you told me this wasn't possible, or just not much of a possibility. And he's like, I know, I'm so sorry. And um gave me the information to see, they call them like a gynoc, something like that. He says this is the best one in the area. And so I go and see Dr. Cloven. She's super nice, but she says you have two options. The first one is a hysterectomy. They take it all out, including your ovaries and some lymph nodes, and you really don't have to do any radiation or chemotherapy or anything after that if we can get it all out. The other option was to get an MRI done to see more information about it. And they said that there was some medication that they could give to sort of slow down the cancer so that we could try and do IVF, which I had considered IVF before, but with my whole needle thing, it's a very scary option. And especially when it's not guaranteed to work.
Mm-hmm.
And there was definitely some risk involved if you did it this way because, they can slow down the cancer as best they can, but it's still going to continue growing, and you just don't know how much it could spread in that time. And then with the whole not guarantee of even getting pregnant with IVF, I did some praying. I did a lot of praying because I wanted babies. I wanted babies. I wanted my body to get pregnant and have a child of my own. My grandfather was William Keith, and Stephen's grandfather was William Keith. And so, like, mine was William Keith Wilden, his was William Keith Ickes, and I thought,
Oh,
great, we will have the William Keith Denison, right? Like, that
oh,
was
yeah,
always like,
yeah,
I'm gonna have a William Keith
right,
Denison.
yeah. So you have this awful choice between completely eliminating the possibility of any pregnancy by a hysterectomy or let the cancer continue and go this IVF route, which is never guaranteed, but kind of the only possible way that you might get pregnant, it's looking like
Yeah.
at that point. So do you choose to try this whatever percentage, success rate it is that you might have success with IVF and run the risk of your cancer spreading?
Yeah.
Or do you get rid of the cancer? Gosh,
Yeah.
I can't imagine having to make that decision, Pam.
And not only was it scary that the cancer could spread, but then there's the thought of if you have the baby, but the cancer just spreads, and then, what if they're not able to take care of it and I die and then Steven is left alone with the baby? There's just so many things
Yeah.
to consider at
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, well, let's do the MRI because then they can see how bad the cancer is. Because if it's not so bad, it's, you know, more chances that they could keep it from spreading too much. Um, so I scheduled the MRI, but I just kept getting this feeling that I just needed to schedule the hysterectomy. And going through the MRI was just going to delay the hysterectomy. And so the next day, I called and canceled the MRI, and I called the doctor and I said, we need to do the hysterectomy. Probably the hardest decision I've ever made.
I know anyone who's made that decision, it has not been a light one, but especially someone in a situation like yours. I can't imagine.
Oh man, I went down a crazy rabbit hole after that. I started looking for Facebook pages, Facebook groups of women who had had hysterectomies because of this cancer to see like what was going to happen afterwards, how my body, like what was, a hysterectomy does so much to your body. I was really scared. I mean, I had had surgeries before, but this was removing my whole reproductive system,
Yeah.
and then I found all these Facebook pages that were for, I forget what they call it, but it was childless, not by choice, basically, is what they were.
Did
It
you
was
find
just,
that Facebook groups are kind of, I don't know, a little bit of the Wild West when it
oh
comes
my
to
gosh,
how helpful they'll actually be?
so,
Because
so
kind of like going to
depressing.
Google for, yeah.
It was the worst. Like, I just kept seeing sob story after sob story. And I was like, where's the people like giving love and support and like bringing us up? Like it was the worst. But I have been so blessed to have the most amazing people in my life because I felt so much love around me. And it's hard to think about peace in the moment because I was so sad about everything. But I did sort of feel a peace about it. Like I knew that was what I was supposed to do. And I knew that my Savior and my Heavenly Father were there for me, just like everyone else around me. And that somehow everything was going to be okay. So I scheduled the hysterectomy and I think it was for like a week later. And at this point, I had a tradition of getting my hair done before surgery. So I went and I got my hair done by my sister-in-law. And while I'm getting my hair done, they call me, and my surgery was supposed to be 2 days away. And they called me and said, "Hey, she can do the surgery tomorrow." And I was just like, okay, sure, let's, do it, I guess." Because again, one of the reasons I had made this decision was because I felt like it needed to be done sooner than later. But man, there was so much crying that night before. And I don't know if you know this or not, but if they do a total complete hysterectomy where they take out your ovaries, you go into surgical menopause. If they leave the ovaries, that doesn't happen. You're still able to have all your normal hormones. But unfortunately, because of the cancer, they had to take all of it out. And then they take some lymph nodes as well to see if it's spread and how far. And when they say you go into surgical menopause right after a hysterectomy, they really mean like immediately.
You're there.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's
It's yeah. So after the hysterectomy, I got to stay in the hospital overnight, but they're so good to you there, except for one thing, and that you have a hysterectomy in the maternity ward. Yeah, you're in the maternity ward.
so you're surrounded by women giving birth.
Yeah. So after the hysterectomy, they want you up and walking around, and they have you walk the halls. So here I am. I just
Mm.
lost all chances of having a baby. And I'm walking down the halls of these women with babies. So that was hard. And then my mental health just tanked from there.
Did they give you an idea of what to expect as far as how you would experience that surgical
No,
menopause? Like how the hormones would just be gone or what it
no.
would feel like? You
And
okay, so that just kinda hits you
yeah,
out of nowhere.
yeah. Like they tell you that you're going to go into menopause, but going into menopause naturally is a much more gradual experience than surgical menopause, where suddenly you're having hot flashes and you feel like you're bipolar. Um, it is crazy.
Probably like 10 years of perimenopause all condensed
Yeah,
into like a few days.
yeah. And so for the next couple months, I thought I was crazy. I tried to run away several times. I would get in my car and drive off, and Google can let some people see your location. I turned all of that off. I didn't want anybody to know where I was. And I would just sit in my car crying, thinking the world was better off without me. And my brain is like, you're better off not being here. So eventually, in April, like 4 months after the surgery, my husband took me to this mental health hospital near us that had an outpatient program. And so I did their outpatient program. And unfortunately, because it's cancer, you can't get hormone replacements. A lot of people can take hormone replacements, but my doctor said that it could cause the cancer to come back. And, luckily they said they got it all, but I still had to go back every 6 months for them to check to see. how it was progressing. I didn't have to do any chemo or radiation therapy, but I did have to not have hormones. So going through this mental health thing was really, really great. And they ended up diagnosing me with ADHD, which I've always thought I had ADHD, but that's a whole nother story. ADHD in women and not getting diagnosed until your 30s or
Yeah.
40s is, yeah.
Yeah. How common it
Um,
is.
so, however, for anyone that might not know if they have it and they start to get symptoms as they go through menopause, that's a real thing. Like your hormones and menopause start making your ADHD worse. So that made, not just going through menopause, but also ADHD symptoms like super bad. And so, yeah. So, I mean, that's most of my story. I At this point, I know I'm not going to have kids. We did the fostering, we tried to adopt, and you mentioned this before, how some people are like, "Oh, well, it would have been too hard to deal with kids and cancer," but people do it all the time. People do it all the time. But I have so many people that are like, you're going through these health problems. It's a good thing you don't have kids to worry about. And I'm like, I would have made it work if I had kids.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like that is not something to tell me that,
Yeah.
you know, that that's just not a positive thing the way some people think it is.
Yeah.
So,
One of those comments people make just in an effort to be helpful or supportive, but
yeah,
it just they don't know how it lands. And
yeah, I appreciate that they're trying to make me feel better, but nope, that just dings. And
yeah. Yeah. So your hysterectomy was in 2020.
2020. Yeah.
So it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember that. It's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah. Sometime in the last 4 months, I went to my final appointment with my gynonc.
Mm.
So I got the all clear. I don't need to go every 6 months anymore. So that's great.
Yay. Yeah. Good
Um,
news.
I still have to go every year, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm not bleeding anymore, I don't have periods to deal with, that's great because they were definitely painful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know what was the hardest is that I've had friends in their 40s have babies.
Mm.
So even though I hadn't had kids yet, I kept thinking, it's okay. I still have time. It's still possible. My body
Yeah.
hasn't reached its, you know,
Yeah.
there's people that even in their 50s have had babies. So I thought for sure, like, it's okay. It's still going to happen sometime.
Yeah. Biologically, it was still a possibility
Yeah.
at some level. Yeah.
And then you get told, nope, it's not going to be a possibility anymore. And then the craziest thing happens a couple years later. I have an aunt that she's only a couple years older than me. And she got pregnant in her 40s. I think maybe she might have been 39 or 40 when she got pregnant, but the baby was definitely when she was 40.
Mm.
And they had been married for a long time. My little cousin was still a little girl when they got married. And this was my uncle. So my uncle had a daughter with his first wife, but never had kids with his second wife. And then decades later, she got pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're like, look, see, it happens. It's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was so happy for her, but
Mm.
so devastated.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that was the last baby shower I went to.
I remember the last one I went to.
Yeah, I have stopped going to baby showers since then. And I feel terrible because I am very happy for people that they can have kids, but I just can't
Yeah.
go to a
Yeah.
baby
No,
shower
sometimes it's
anymore.
just
Yeah.
so you this is kind of your story. Your health has just been wild all over the place and just a lot of difficulty um with your cycles and the cancer and everything.
Yeah.
And I want to say this because I know you have done so much work to overcome that needle phobia. And now you're like poking yourself every day. So you've done
Not
a
every
lot
day.
of really hard, okay, well, regularly,
Yeah.
without it being like traumatic. And I know that was a big thing for you. Obviously, I mean
Yeah.
that's what kept you away for so long. So you've gotten past so much of that, and you've done so much work. And in the middle of all this, I just have to say, as you know, someone who's been close to you for so long, even though you were going through all this terrible, like excruciating stuff, you have always been the person that has just poured love into other people, and if any of that came back around after your surgery, you know, that's just a tiny portion of what you deserve, because in the middle of all this stuff, you have just always been so kind and generous and compassionate to others while you've been going through your own pain. And I know that that is not an easy place to be. And yet, that's what you've done, and you're amazing. So,
Thank you because I feel like I have not been that person. I feel like I have not done enough to show love and compassion to people. So I thank you for saying that.
oh gosh, seeing you with some of those kids you fostered and just knowing some of the things you've done. I mean, for me too, just as a friend. Yeah, you are one of the most generous people I know. So, at this point, I mean, we've kind of got your story out there now, and um I don't know, having gone through everything that you've gone through, I mean, what do you want people to know about the struggle? Because you're not the only person with PCOS. You're not the only person who's had a hysterectomy and or who's, you know, had to end their fostering journey for whatever reason. Or, um, you know, there's so much. There's just so many other people who have struggled with some of these things too. So either for them or for the people who love them, what do you want to share? What's helpful or just good to be aware of?
There's so much and I don't even know how to say any of it.
I think one thing that you brought up that's really important to maybe put out there is the whole mental health piece of particularly going through a hysterectomy and then being thrown into
Oh
menopause
yeah.
immediately, and the toll that that can take on your mental health. Because I don't think that's something that is talked about. No,
Yeah,
it's
I hadn't, when I was looking at what happens after a hysterectomy and everything, I I knew that I would be going through surgical menopause and that my hormones would go crazy. And, some people said that they definitely felt a little crazy, but I did not know it would be so bad. And again, I think part of it is my ADHD because I have something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria or rejection sensitive dysphoria, something like that, which basically means that so let's say like you're talking to me and I say something and you kind of roll your eyes at me. It's not necessarily negative, right? But my brain says that's negative and then multiplies it in my brain. If you do something positive towards me, half of the positive incoming signs that I get, my brain ignores and only accepts half of them. So all the
I only accept
negativity,
50% of your
yeah,
positive comments.
yeah. So my brain, it's ignoring half of the positive and doubling the negative. And then when it feels this rejection, it's not just a mental thing, it is a physical pain. I physically feel it in my stomach. Like it makes me sick. It's a pain and it comes out as a very angry person. My reactions aren't always the greatest when my RSD is acting up because at that point I have tried to keep it in for so long and it's finally all coming out. And I sometimes have to sit in my car by myself and yell. It is a very physical yell. It's not just like sound coming out of me. I feel this yell in my whole body as a very angry, frustrated, sad yell. I've never like really been a physical person to punch things, but when my RSD is really bad, I feel like punching something, which ends up usually me like hitting my hand or doing something to hurt myself.
Well, I think I so much appreciate you, Pam, just sharing everything, sharing your story, like the nitty-gritty, hard, yucky stuff, because
Yeah.
that's what you went through. And other people have gone through similar stuff. And this is where I'm tempted to like, okay, how can we bring this together and put a bow on it? Like these were all the lessons learned and this is why I had to go through this. And you know what? That's not what we're doing.
And you know,
We're
I still don't know why I've had to go through this. Like, yes, I've had a couple surgeries since then. Yes, it would have been difficult to deal with if I had kids. But again, people do it all the time. I still don't understand why I've had to go through infertility, why I haven't been able to adopt any kids. But there is a song by Michael McLean. It might be called Hold On or The Light Will Come, something like that. But at the end, he just repeats it a lot. Hold on, the light will come. And that is one of my favorite songs to listen to sometimes because I know that there are dark days and I still have them, but I just know that I need to hold on because the light will come. Maybe not in this lifetime, but I know that there are blessings in heaven that I I don't know about, you know? And we're promised that we will all have the chance to have a family if we are righteous and hold on to our covenants and our faith. So I know that there are blessings and even blessings now that have happened that I don't see, I don't realize that are there. So I know that all this has been for some reason, and maybe that reason is to be there for someone else that might need it. It might be because I felt alone and I don't want everyone else to feel alone in their struggles.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, you brought it right back to faith, which is what we ultimately want this podcast to focus
Yes.
on. That, yes, we go through these terrible pains, sometimes for years and years and decades, and it's brutal and so painful. But if we hold on to that light that is going to come, It might take a while. It might just come in little patches here and there, and we might just have to grasp on to little rays,
Yeah.
wherever we can get them. But hold on to whatever we can. Hold on to the Lord. And when we start looking away from him, which we're gonna do, because it just is really hard, we just come back to him. We just come back. Sometimes we can do it sooner. Sometimes it takes a little longer, for our hearts to be in that place where we're like, okay, yes, I trust you. Everything is going to be okay. As long as we just don't abandon that effort completely to come back to the Lord, to stick with him, to trust in him, that he has a plan and that he's gonna work it all out. And there's so much we cannot see.
And
So much, right?
let me tell you, it is not easy because my husband left the church in 2020. So
Another reason that was such a hard year.
yeah, yeah. And my brother has left the church. I have lots of friends that have left the church. And so it would be so easy to walk away, you know? So easy. But I can't because I know this is where the Lord wants me. And I know that I'm supposed to hold on to that faith. And man, I highly recommend you all go and listen to that song by Michael McLean. It is called Hold On, the Light Will Come. I'm just going to read part of it for you real quick.
Okay.
And I'm probably going to cry, so it might not come out so clear. The message of this moment is so clear and as certain as the rising of the sun. If your world is filled with darkness, doubt, and fear, just hold on. Hold on. The light will come. Everyone who's ever tried and failed stands much taller when the victory's won. And those who've been in darkness for a while kneel much longer when the light has come. Oof. Just hold on. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you for pouring your heart out into this episode and for encouraging us all. I think with that, we will wrap up and just remind anyone listening that if you're going through infertility, if you've gone through any of these things or anything else related to the pain of trying to have a family, that you are not alone. This is a quote from Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf that I have always loved. He said, "Never stop hoping for all of the righteous desires of your heart, but don't close your eyes and hearts to the simple and elegant beauties of each day's ordinary moments that make up a rich, well-lived life." Remember, you're not alone, and the best is yet to come. Thank you, Pam. Love you.
Too.
Thank you so much for listening today. We know we are not professionals and there's probably some sound issues that need to be improved. So we appreciate your patience as we get better with all of this. We also want to invite anyone who would like to share their story to reach out to us. We have a Facebook group called Full Faith Empty Arms LDS Infertility that we are trying to get started and grow. We're also on Instagram, Full Faith Empty Arms. So feel free to reach out to us through either of those channels. And please go on and find those pages and help us gain a little bit of momentum there so that more people will see some resources out there for support. Because there are probably a lot of people who can relate to your unique struggle. We just have to connect. Thanks so much.